Hey friends, Mystery here, and today I'll be talking in a very timely manner about the Hive Scum. Yes, it's been 2 months to the day pretty much since we have had the release of Hive Scum, had this guy on our hands, and my opinion on him has radically altered over the course of his history. So in this video, I'll be explaining a little bit of his history, starting with the pre-release, which I think some of you guys might be aware of how I've talked about this before, that I'll be telling you how this class was balanced before it was publicly available. And then I'll be talking about how I initially saw the class and how I have shifted my perceptions over time, and of course also giving my idea of where this class currently ranks in the power structure, whether it is position 1 or position 6 or somewhere in between. And I'll also be doing what this video is generally mostly going to be about, which is talking about where I think they should continue focusing their efforts to update this class to get it to where it needs to be, because it is very strong in some parts, but then it has some other parts that are really disappointing and are just ultimately going to end up being dead weight for the class overall. And this is why I kind of view this class as a kind of a lopsided experience right now, where you have some insanely powerful stuff, some beyond S tier stuff, and you have some really D tier stuff, and he has a very unique blend of that right now. And it remains to be seen what fatshark do to update this class this year, so I want to say that everything I'm about to say is very much tentative. This class being new and being that it is a volatile sort of character right now, many players are not very good at it, and so its win rates are probably pretty low. I might expect some buffs for it, but they might also be looking to do some nerfs while the cement is still wet and players aren't too attached to the toys they've gotten, right? It's better to nerf earlier than just to wait a long time and then do it then. But anyway, I digress. Let's begin, but not before I remind you that if you like Darktide content, you like the sound of my voice, or whatever else you have come here for, and you want to keep abreast of everything that's going on the rest of this year with Darktide, then you should definitely subscribe. Help me reach Warhammer 40k subscribers, and I really appreciate you. Let's begin here with just talking generally about how the Hive Scum began its life, at least in my experience, because I am not a playtester. I'm just someone who has a little bit of early access because I'm a content creator or whatever. So I played it about 2 weeks early, and in those 2 weeks, it was pretty radically different, not gonna lie. What we saw was a class that had a doubled priority in terms of damage dealing and a halved priority in terms of survivability. And I mean this quite literally. Some of the talents, such as the precision violence and voice of tertium talents at the top of the tree, for instance, the ones that regenerate toughness on hit and on crit hit, and for melee, and then you have those ranged kill replenishing for the ranged, that stuff was halved in terms of its value. So you had to get twice as much damage done or twice as much kills in order to get your toughness back. And of course, this was pre the swapping, the big flipping, where they moved a lot of toughness regenerating things to the top of the tree and moved some more dodging stuff down. The class at the same time had doubled value for a lot of its offensive abilities. So Desperado, the unlimited ammo run and gun sort of thing, had a 30-second base duration, as I remember, and it extended for 3 seconds per kill, per highlighted kill. So you basically could stay in this thing for 2 minutes plus, no problem, easy peasy, which was amazing. And then you also had Rampage, which instead of the current 75% additional melee power it can give you if you choose Rampage and it's one of its ability modifiers, it would give you 150% of total strength added to your character, which was nuts. And all of this was combined with the fact that every stim was a 30-second cooldown, regardless of investment in how powerful the stim was. And at the very bottom of the tree was chemical dependency, which is the one good keystone right now. And that thing, as you might remember, it gives you 10% ability cooldown reduction per stack. So you can get up to 40 currently. That was up to 60 in the pre-release, and then Chem Enhanced, which gives you 5% crit chance per stack, up to 20% now, was 10% in pre-release. So you could get 40% crit there. Hive Scums are running around with over 110, 120% crit chance. So the class was pretty comically busted if you could survive long enough to actually deal the damage. He was incredibly frail, and it doesn't help that when you're playing on a server where everyone's getting early access to the Hive Scum, everybody's Hive Scum, and it's pretty hard to survive in a pack of a bunch of scums. You need some other support from other classes. But now that once the class was released, they set that all to roughly the normal values, where you got a lot more focus on that defensive stuff and then less focus on the offensive skills. They have worse cooldowns, etc. The one thing that did see a really large improvement in terms of its usability was stim supply. This was really bugged and not functional pre-release, but currently, in the current state of the game, where Hive Scum is now, stim supply is a very, very strong ability, and it remains to be seen if this gets changed any further. To me, it seems like it's a little bit buggy or may not be functioning as intended. If it is one of the stronger abilities in the game. It's very useful, and it offers a lot of power for the whole team, including the Hive Scum who uses it. But if it gets nerfed, it might shift it in the other direction. So this is why I'm saying that anything I say today is very much tentative. It could shift greatly if some of this stuff is revealed to be bugs, etc. We, of course, also had a big change about 2 weeks into Hive Scum's release, when players were complaining that, holy shit, I can't fucking complete a game with this shit because I'm just getting killed every second. Basically what they did is they moved some of the defensive nodes from the top of the, or from the bottom of the tree, which were living down the bottom middle of the tree, which I suppose I can show you that now. Bring this up here. Down here were a few defensive nodes that could replenish your toughness. They moved those up to the top of the tree. Number one on that list was Burst of Energy, which gives you this big boost of toughness when your toughness is broken with a small cooldown. And yeah, that was really, really big in terms of getting his survivability up and keeping him from getting blown up in short succession. The other really big thing they did on this 2-week patch was they buffed the absolute shit out of Boombringer, the rocket launcher, and have made it into the single best blitz in the game by my approximation. So we got a huge bump in terms of the usability of the class. The class got a lot better with this patch, and this was just prior to my last time where I evaluated the powers of the class, and notably, I ranked him last. And I think that was something I regretted almost immediately, because I had not put in enough hours with the new configuration to be like, oh, this really changed him up, this really made him feel different. And now that I have put in those hours, and also perhaps even more importantly, I've seen other people that have put in a lot of hours and know a fuck ton about how to play this class and are way better than I probably can ever be. Those players can really show you what is capable in this class. And this is where I want to talk about like why I am bumping his power rankings up again. I think that this class has a lot in common with Psyker in terms of his power levels, because Psyker also has this thing going on where he has a prerequisite to skill before you can get any utility out of him, but once you hit that threshold, you start to ascend. You unlock the potential to do some crazy, crazy stuff. And because this class has unlimited ammo, because this class has talents like hyper violence, which can multiply your melee damage to absurd levels, because this class has rocket launcher and chem grenade and all that stuff, and has some relatively good cooldowns on some pretty good abilities, -1. Yeah, he becomes a class that skilled players can perform really insane feats with. And this is something that really, as I said, reminds me of Psyker, where once you get that skill, you can start to see exactly what this guy can do. And the Psyker can do some war crimes, and so can this class. However, I don't think I'm quite ready yet to say that he is the second place behind Psyker, because of course we still have to contend with the Veteran. The Veteran is crutching hard on his ability to become a munitions factory, literally have infinite ammo, literal infinite grenades, and being a gold toughness provider for the entire team on an absurdly short cooldown, right? If that stuff gets nerfed, we can revisit this, but for right now, I think that the power of gold toughness and having that short cooldown on the best ability in the game, and of course the crack grenade, whatever grenade spam that this class can do, that has to keep the Veteran above the Hive Scum. I know the Hive Scum can do some absolutely tremendous things if played very, very well, but to my taste, the Veteran is just a win the game character right now. He is such an absolute staple to teams because gold toughness is absolutely, positively like invaluable, and the stagger that he can provide. Yeah, this class is probably the single most valuable class to bring to any composition, I would say. Well, most compositions, with Psyker slightly behind him. And Psyker just wins out in terms of the sheer amount of ton damage you can pump out. And then I would say that the Hive Scum is just behind that. I want to distinguish here what sets apart these three classes, the Hive Scum, the Veteran, and the Psyker, from the other three, which I will call martial classes. The Ogryn, the Arbites, and the Zealot. If you think about what the Ogryn, Arbites, and the Zealot have in terms of what they do, they are very much living in what I would call a Vermintide 2 era. Yes, they have some abilities that enable them to charge, or put down, or taunt, or like kind of, buff allies that are in this area or whatever, right? That sort of stuff makes sense to me. And what you see when you're playing with these characters is you do meaningfully engage with most enemies in melee combat. You see a pack of 10 crushers, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to walk up there and you're going to start hitting them. You might stagger them all, you might taunt them all, you might throw a trap mine or a shock mine down or something like that if you're RBDs, but really, at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot of frills to what these characters do. They just get up there and they start trading blows. And I recently ran a poll, and I asked you guys of the 4 base classes, which was the most your favorite to play, and with some clearness, the Zealot won. The Zealot was the favorite. About 40-something% of you guys chose Zealot, and I think that's because the Zealot has a really, really core mechanical gameplay feel to where he really gets to meaningfully engage with everything Darktide is supposed to be about, right? He gets in there and he gets in the nitty-gritty, and you see some enemies and you know you have the power to dispatch these enemies, right? You've got your fucking big ass sword, you got charged, you can take blows, but also you have the evasion and the mobility and the damage to retaliate and dodge and block and whatever else it is. You really sort of get all the meat off the bone of Darktide when you're playing a character like this, because you actually fight the enemies. Compare that to, and the same thing applies to Ogryn and RBDs as well, compare that to our top 3 classes, where when they see a big threatening engagement of enemies coming their way, well, 2 of them's immediate response is to pull out a grenade. The Hive Scum and the Veteran both just start shooting rockets and throwing bombs in the direction of the problem, and then shooting infinite ammo at it until the point where most of it is dead before it can even get close to you. You know, Tox Pistol and stuff like that just absolutely annihilate crushers, right? And then all you got to do is keep your distance and run away. Psyker, of course, just lights everything on fire, blasts it with Psychic Scream, and we're cooking. Like, we are basically not playing the same game between these 2 different sets of characters here. I have been thinking a lot about it in the sense of Warframe lately. If you've played Warframe, it's basically like a light MMO that focuses on like ability-based characters. And the abilities and skills on these 3 upper powerful characters are much more reminiscent of something you would find in a Warframe than something that you would find in a Vermintide, or what I would expect to see in a Darktide, right? Voice of command, bubble, rocket launcher, the Tox grenade, the what else? Crack grenade printing. Like these sort of things are so powerful. Flame staff. These things are so powerful to the point that they would be more appropriate in a horde-based MMO shooter than it is appropriate in a game that's supposed to be a tactical sort of, mostly thrilling melee and combat horde shooter like Darktide is. And so that's where I think that when I'm talking about, like, what is my ideal goal? What would I want for the future of Darktide? I'm not the one who decides this, but what I would really like, honestly, I think I would prefer to play in the lower power category world. I really like playing like that. I miss playing that. It's understandable if they want to go the other way. It's fun sometimes too to play as the super-powered hyper carry character that has all these crazy skills that can just blow up whole hordes and stuff too. That is awesome in its own right, but I feel like the problem is those 2 have a hard time coexisting right now. It just kind of makes you feel shitty when you're playing one of the other characters and you got someone who's running around doing this shit. So yeah, that's where I stand in terms of where I think the Hive Scum is right now. A tentative 3rd place, definitely above the lower martial cast, but he remains to be seen where he shakes out this year. Now let's go over to the talent tree, bring that back up for you, and let's talk about some things that I think need work in terms of bringing this class into being a full spectrum character, because right now he is really crutching on a few select things that are bringing him I would say 85% of his power is derived from a few select nodes and talents, and I think they could do better at dispersing this across the tree. I'm not saying they need to make the things that he has any weaker or whatever. I just want them to bring more power to the other stuff to make it comparable, because I don't think there's really any one thing on this class that stands out to me as overpowered other than maybe the rocket launcher and maybe pickpocket. But I feel like if you also nerfed pickpocket or something like that, you might just fundamentally make the class way worse than it needs to be. So we can just leave it be and then we'll fuck with it later. Let's start here, first of all, and talk about what should be done about the abilities. There's one ability that I've had, sort of my ire set on for a while when I talked about this character, and that is Enhanced Desperado. I don't think this ability is worth enough for it to have as long a cooldown as it does. It needs to offer something else to players, because dodging enemy range attacks is it's kind of a core skill for many players to learn in the game. And so when you're already doing that by default, this doesn't offer anything to you. And if you were taking it as a, it's sort of like a noob trap to me, where if you're a lesser experienced player and you're choosing this, you aren't really getting very much value out of this skill in general, right? What does it offer you? Free reloads. Well, guess what? Only 3 nodes away, there's a node that gives you infinite ammo. So what's the point of having an infinite ammo ability that just makes you dodge range attacks? So I think that this ability should offer something new and unique to the Hive Scum that can make playing these ranged archetype builds just better. I think a very obvious thing to do here would be to give this a ton of rending. Right now, as I've made a video about recently, right now carapace armor is a huge problem. So if they want to address that, they certainly can do that first, and then they can come back and revisit this issue. But the Hive Scum is clearly a class that is trying to lean into bullet-based weapons, right? Almost all of his weapons are bullet weapons. And that is what Desperado wants you to use it with, right? It wants you to use it with the dualies. It wants you to use it with the Uzis. It wants you to use it with Shredder Pistol or whatever else, right? That's the whole idea here. The problem is that almost all of those weapons are completely ineffectual against carapace armor. So the first time you come up against a Crusher, you suddenly can't do anything at all with these guns. And that is something that they could specifically use this ability to address, where the other characters can use those guns still, right? You could still run Stim Supply and then go with the dual Uzis or go with the infantry auto gun and pump some serious damage into lightly armored characters, but you wouldn't have the benefit of being able to actually shred armor. So why don't we give Enhanced Desperado, some stacking abilities such as, getting just a bunch of rending, or perhaps bullets apply a percentage brittleness and give it a good amount of brittleness when you're doing this, right? Not just 20%, but instead make it 40 or 50, or who even knows how much would be required to balance it. But right now, when we're looking at the value that is generated by activating an ability, Stim Supply obviously has a very high capacity to generate value, because not only does it cleanse corruption and make you immune to corruption, it does that for the whole team, and it can apply the stim effects to you and the whole team additionally for 15 seconds, which is nuts, right? That's a huge effect to offer to everybody in the team. So this has a massive value per use. Rampage also has a massive value, literally almost doubling your damage. Well, it actually does. In terms of DPS potential, we are ascending our damage like nearly 2x when this ability is fully activated and stacked up, getting extra cleave. And yeah, this is an incredibly strong ability that you feel the power. But when you activate Enhanced Desperado, really all you're getting out of it is the ability to dodge and some free range or some free ammo. So I would love to see something brought here that gives this ability a distinct reason to be chosen as the primary ranged archetype. If you're going to go for a range build, you want to choose this because X, insert reason here, and that is what needs to be added to this ability. It just needs more. Okay, let's move past this and let's talk about the other really big sticking point that I've brought up a number of times previously, and that is our keystones. We have one keystone in this class that is really remarkable, or can be ranked in any sort of way. This is the chemical dependency keystone. He sort of relies on this is for most of the classes because he has a dependency on having his cooldowns up very quickly. Rampage, when it's down, is a bad time, so getting more cooldown is very valuable. Same thing with Desperado. This is the only Keystone that offers more cooldown, so we obviously take this. Plus, it gives you damage reduction, which is valuable on a class that is very squishy. Plus, it gives you crit chance, which is valuable on a class that loves to crit. And it just works really well with everything to do with the class because you're constantly stimming anyway. And you can hit the full effectiveness at 3 stacks with any stim. You can hit the full effectiveness at 4 stacks with only 1 branch of your stim allocated. So this is just the de facto choice for pretty much every build. And I struggled, as you'll notice when I release my build compilations, I struggled finding ways to justify using other Keystones in builds just to, you know, for the sake of diversity, because not everyone wants to pick the same Keystone over and over and over, but it is a really, really hard argument to make as to why you choose anything else. The reason for that being, the other Keystones offer very minimal benefits with poor uptimes. That is the short and sweet summary of the problem here. So let's start with Vulture's Mark, because I think this one is salvageable, right? The problem here is that you have to kill an elite or special enemy every 4 seconds. You get 3 stacks, and each stack gives you 5% range damage, 5% critical strike chance on range attacks only, and 5% movement speed. And this also, when it max stacks, restores 15% toughness to you and allies and coherency. Now, this is the problem with this one is, first of all, they fall off all at once. It's an all or nothing perk. So if you miss that 8-second window, you lose all your stacks instantly. You go back down to 0. In my practice with this, I hovered around the 2-stack mark on average in combat, which is okay. But you know, the buffs that is applying here, if we look at a pound for pound, if I'm getting 2 stacks of this buff on average in combat throughout the game, what is that offering me? 10% movement speed, 10% range critical strike chance, 10% damage. And then, you know, like 2/3 of the time I'll have that last buff there. If we compare that apples to apples against chemical dependency will have, first of all, a 100% uptime, between 30 and 40% ability cooldown reduction, between 15 and 20% toughness damage reduction, and between 15 and 20% critical strike chance. Compare that to the roughly 10% critical strike chance and 10% damage and 10% movement speed here. So, I mean, I think the picture is pretty clear that you would choose chemical dependency over Vulture's Mark. Just for the basic thing of like, this is functional no matter what. No matter if everybody else is stealing elite kills from you or what your build is, you're going to get value out of this. And this is critical strike chance that applies to everything, ranged and melee. This is toughness damage reduction that applies to everything. Cooldown is good for every build. Vulture's Mark is only good for range builds. You have to get these kills with the range attacks, and it only benefits the range damage, which really, really pigeonholes you into the build. So the other, you know, that is the thing that I've been harping on a ton, is that I really don't like the design of this left Keystone, Vulture's Mark, and then Adrenaline Frenzy, because they specifically say you must play ranged. You must play melee in order to both generate stacks and for this and to get the effects of it. That is kind of a strong U-turn from the really solid design I think they had when they were doing something like developing Arbites. Arbites has 3 very open-ended Keystones, right? He has Execution Order, which is super open-ended, can be done with or without a dog, offers benefits to both melee and ranged kills, offers like tangible benefits in the sense of being able to see where elites and threatening enemies are through walls and stuff. He's got that middle Keystone, which isn't great, but you know, what is that called? Terminus Warrant, right? It is at least attempting to do something with like a hybrid gun melee playstyle, and you can actually tailor it to, like, you know, favor a mostly ranged, mostly melee playstyle. And then you have the one on the right, which is Forceful, and Forceful can stack staggering blows, stack this effect, and it can stack on both melee and range, so it's open-ended on both sides. So even though the Arbites is a 90% melee class, he still is leaving opportunities open for range-focused builds within all 3 of his Keystones, which I think is amazing. That is a really, really good design, and it gives you, well, you or me especially, as someone who loves to create builds and share them with you guys, it gives me a lot of inspiration and places to go and create unique and clever interactions. And that, I think, is what they should be striving to do, is like give players more open-ended tools, because they'll find these really cool interactions. This sucks for that because it is only for guns. Okay, and then the other thing is the add-ons to this. Both this and our middle keystone down here have the same problem with those add-ons, is that they are just really bland. Like they augment the base ability, but not in like a good way or like an effective way at all. Vulture's Push does like next to nothing, because apparently, I just found this out, apparently it scales with the size of the damage that kills the elite, but there's very few weapons on this class that actually deal single target like big blasts of damage, so you don't get very much effect out of this at all. Patient Hunter is just making this ability not so crap so it doesn't fall off as often, gives you better uptime, and Vulture's Dodge is very wonky and kind of broken, because many attacks, range attacks, this is good for, but you might already be taking Desperado, in which case you don't need it. But range attacks is good for, but for melee attacks, many melee attacks do not count as a targeted attack. They are instead like an AoE, basically, and this doesn't give you a dodge against that. Now, that may be something they fix in a bug patch, but for right now, it's just not very much value at all. So, and you also have to be spraying constantly in order to get this, because it's a 1 second dodge. Then we have over here Adrenaline Frenzy, which I also have massive problems with. I think that I like this one even less, because it is requiring you to be in combat, to be constantly hitting and getting critical hits in order to get these stacks, and you do not get to choose your fate with this one here. If you don't hit enemies, you start to lose stacks every 2 seconds. And if you do hit enough enemies and you hit 30 stacks, well, you have 10 seconds during which time you get this buff, 25% melee damage and 10% attack speed. Now, granted, this is only going to be used with melee builds. If you're doing a melee focused build, 99% of the time you're using Rampage, right? And 1% of the time you would be using Stim Supply. This is getting less value because we're already getting a bunch of this from Rampage, and honestly, these buffs aren't that impressive in terms of the grand scheme of Hive Scum. Really, most of your damage, you have very high attack speeds in general already, so 10% more is going to be missed in most cases, and then things like punching above one's weight, and of course hyper violence, like these things are better effective damage adders. Hyper violence just makes it so that you don't even need to add more damage at a certain point, because it multiplies the damage based on what you've already dealt. So Adrenaline Frenzy, it'll go into effect, it offers you a middling buff at best, and then it falls off after 10 seconds, and you cannot control when it activates, right? So compare this with something like the Zealot's Blazing Piety. This is an ability that stacks up to 25 times. It can stack on kills and crits, and when it is stacked up, those stacks stay on you as long as you continue getting crits or getting kills. And if you don't, every, I think it's like 8 seconds or so, you lose 1 stack. And then you could just get those right back and start again. So what's the uptime on Blazing Piety in combats? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's incredibly high. It is very, very high, and that offers you up to 25% crit and some regeneration per second, which is a very valuable stats to have. It's just good because crits are good on Zealot and all classes. So this ability has a really poor uptime, and it's hard to get it to activate on certain weapons, because if you aren't hitting fast, you're not activating fast enough. The way they worked around that is they turned all of its auxiliary nodes into different ways of generating those talents or those points, and then not losing them as fast. The Stoked Rage modifier down here is basically essential because it literally doubles the effect. It'll double the uptime of Adrenaline Frenzy, and the only one that is actually unique and offers you anything that, like, other than just like, oh, actually make your Keystone activate, would be Adrenaline Unbound, which is 5% toughness per second, which is not that impressive, right? So yeah, so that's where I stand with these, is like these are very much mono build focused, only for melee, only for range, and they have nothing interesting to offer to the class, which I think is a major, major oversight, because this class is so interesting. This class has so much going on, so much potential to play around with in terms of like You know, what if we had Keystones that that sacrificed attack speed for more heavy hitting blows? Or what if we had Keystones that, like, you know, would make it so that your guns have a less accuracy, like we did like a gauge from Borderlands 2, where as you kill more enemies, your guns get less and less accurate, but they get more damage. So you get closer and closer and spray these enemies with the Uzis, right? Stuff like that, just like casual ideas off the top of my head. Those ideas sound more interesting and would feel more fun to play with than what we got here. Final notes on the class, in terms of lowlights, in terms of stuff that needs to be brought up, it's Desperado, it's Vulture's Mark, it's Adrenaline Frenzy, it's probably Gunslinger improved in terms of auras here. Ruffian could be swapped out with something else. I would also like to see Untouchable, and like, I think mostly Untouchable here is the one that I really don't like. It's like, who cares about threat in this game? That's sort of a weird thing to fuck with. But yeah, there's some limp nodes in the tree, but not too many, too many. I would like to see some focus shifted away from just needle pistoling down everything. The needle pistol is incredibly powerful and very much too good when combined with pickpocket. But again, pickpocket should stay on the class as it currently exists, because the class is way too ammo hungry without it. For 95% of weapons, maybe if this just didn't work with needle pistol, we would be okay. Something like that. And then finally, in terms of blitzes, I think maybe the rocket launcher is just like, I don't know, I don't want to be that guy, but maybe the rocket launcher, we went a little bit too far with it, because having 4 rockets that do more effect than the Ogryn's big bomb does is kind of silly. Now, the Ogryn needs buffs, don't get me wrong, but like, you know, it kind of feels ridiculous when I'm getting out DPS'd playing a veteran, and I'm shooting stuff all game, and I've got a support scum who's just rocket launchering only, and he does more range DPS than I do because of just rocket launcher. Like, that seems like a problem to me, and it just instantly erases like massive hordes of metal. I'm glad you can do that, because we have stupid massive hordes of rotten armor to contend with most times, but maybe if we just didn't make it like that absurd. I don't know, just float that out there. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video thus far, you are truly a legend for making it to the end, and make sure you're subscribed. I know you already are. You're one of the good ones. Okay, guys. Again, thanks for watching. Love you. See you next time. Bye-bye.